Question 1. The risk matrix shows a pattern of increased suspicious activity in a specific Cleveland neighborhood. While on patrol, an officer observes an individual loitering near a known drug-dealing location, exhibiting furtive movements, and attempting to conceal an object in their waistband as the patrol car approaches. What is the most appropriate course of action for the officer to take, adhering to Ohio law and constitutional principles? Option A. Ignore the individual's behavior as it is not definitive proof of a crime, and continue the patrol to avoid potential accusations of profiling. Option B. Approach the individual, articulate the specific observations that create reasonable suspicion, and conduct a pat-down for weapons if the furtive movements and concealed object suggest a potential threat. Option C. Immediately detain the individual for questioning based on their presence in a high-crime area and their attempt to conceal something. Option D. Initiate a full search of the individual's person and belongings to determine what they are concealing, as the situation appears suspicious. The correct answer is B. Approach the individual, articulate the specific observations that create reasonable suspicion, and conduct a pat-down for weapons if the furtive movements and concealed object suggest a potential threat. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for information with the legal and ethical obligations to respect individual rights and due process. The Cleveland Division of Police operates under Ohio state law and federal constitutional principles, particularly the Fourth Amendment's protection against unreasonable searches and seizures. Officers must make rapid decisions in dynamic situations, but these decisions must be grounded in established legal standards to ensure the integrity of investigations and protect civil liberties. The best approach involves meticulously documenting all observations and articulable facts that form the basis for any suspicion of criminal activity. This aligns with the legal standard for reasonable suspicion, which is required for a lawful stop and frisk under Ohio law and the U.S. Constitution. By focusing on observable behaviors and circumstances that are inconsistent with innocent activity, officers can build a strong, defensible case for their actions. This approach prioritizes evidence-based decision-making and respects the rights of individuals, ensuring that police actions are both effective and lawful. An incorrect approach would be to rely on generalized assumptions or hunches without specific, observable facts. This fails to meet the legal threshold for reasonable suspicion and could lead to unlawful stops and searches, violating Fourth Amendment protections. Such actions undermine public trust and can jeopardize the admissibility of evidence in court. Another incorrect approach is to conduct a search based solely on the individual's presence in a high-crime area. While location can be a factor, it is insufficient on its own to establish reasonable suspicion. This approach risks profiling and discriminatory practices, which are ethically unacceptable and legally problematic under equal protection principles. Further incorrect approach involves delaying the investigation to obtain a warrant when articulable facts already support reasonable suspicion for a brief investigatory stop and pat-down for weapons. While warrants are crucial for searches and arrests, the legal framework allows for immediate action based on reasonable suspicion to ensure officer safety and prevent the destruction of evidence. Unnecessary delays in such circumstances could compromise the investigation. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes the collection of objective, observable facts. This framework involves 1. Assessing the totality of the circumstances. 2. Identifying specific, articulable facts that support a suspicion of criminal activity or a threat to safety. 3. Evaluating these facts against established legal standards, like reasonable suspicion. And 4. Acting in a manner consistent with those standards and departmental policy, while always documenting the rationale for their actions. Question 2. Investigation of a residential burglary in Cleveland, Ohio, has yielded several potential leads, including witness descriptions, partial fingerprints, and a recovered but damaged security camera. What is the most effective and ethically sound approach to optimize the investigation? Option A. Disseminate preliminary suspect information obtained from witness descriptions to local media outlets to solicit public assistance in apprehension. Option B. Immediately focus all available resources on apprehending individuals matching the general witness descriptions, even if definitive evidence linking them to the scene is not yet established. Option C. Delay the processing of physical evidence and surveillance footage to conduct an extensive, time-consuming neighborhood canvass for additional, less concrete information. Option D. Secure the crime scene, conduct thorough witness and victim interviews, and prioritize the analysis of collected physical evidence and surveillance footage to identify potential suspects. The correct answer is D. Secure the crime scene, conduct thorough witness and victim interviews, and prioritize the analysis of collected physical evidence and surveillance footage to identify potential suspects. Explanation: investigation of a complex burglary case in Cleveland, Ohio, presents significant challenges due to the need for efficient resource allocation, timely evidence collection, and maintaining public trust. The primary challenge lies in balancing the imperative to thoroughly investigate with the reality of limited personnel and time, ensuring that investigative efforts are optimized to yield the most impactful results. This requires a strategic approach that prioritizes actions based on their potential to advance the case and adhere to legal and ethical standards. The best approach involves a systematic and evidence-driven strategy. This means immediately securing the crime scene to preserve potential evidence, conducting thorough interviews with witnesses and victims to gather initial information, and then prioritizing the analysis of collected evidence, such as fingerprints, DNA, or surveillance footage, to identify potential suspects. This methodical process, grounded in the principles of criminal investigation and the Ohio rules of criminal procedure, ensures that investigative actions are legally sound, ethically defensible, and most likely to lead to a successful resolution. It aligns with the expectation that law enforcement officers act with diligence and integrity in their pursuit of justice. An approach that focuses solely on immediate suspect apprehension without sufficient evidence collection risks violating due process rights and can lead to wrongful accusations. This fails to adhere to the foundational principles of evidence-based investigation, which are critical for building a strong case admissible in court under Ohio law. Another incorrect approach would be to delay evidence processing in favor of extensive, unfocused neighborhood canvassing. While community engagement is important, prioritizing it over the timely analysis of critical physical evidence can allow that evidence to degrade or be lost, significantly hindering the investigation and potentially allowing a perpetrator to evade capture. This demonstrates a lack of strategic prioritization and an inefficient use of investigative resources. Furthermore, an approach that involves sharing preliminary, unconfirmed suspect information with the media before a formal arrest or charging decision is ethically problematic and can prejudice potential jurors, violating the principles of fair trial and potentially interfering with the judicial process. This action undermines the integrity of the investigation and the presumption of innocence. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the objectives of the investigation. This involves assessing the available information, identifying critical evidence needs, and prioritizing actions based on their likelihood of success and adherence to legal and ethical guidelines. A constant evaluation of progress and a willingness to adapt the strategy based on new information are also crucial components of effective and ethical law enforcement. Question 3. Comparative studies suggest that process optimization in law enforcement can significantly improve operational efficiency. For a Cleveland Division of Police officer who has just seized a firearm during a lawful arrest, what is the most effective and legally sound method for initiating the evidence processing to ensure its admissibility in court, considering the importance of maintaining an unbroken chain of custody under Ohio law? Option A. Rely on the general knowledge that the firearm was secured and assume the evidence technician will accurately log its details later. Option B. Immediately and meticulously document the firearm seizure, including the exact time, location, and circumstances, and then personally transport it to the designated evidence locker, logging each transfer of possession in the official evidence log. Option C. Store the firearm in a temporary, unsecured location within the precinct until there is a more convenient time to formally process it. Option D. Place the firearm in a secure bag and leave it with a general departmental evidence technician for them to log and process at their earliest convenience. The correct answer is B. Immediately and meticulously document the firearm seizure, including the exact time, location, and circumstances, and then personally transport it to the designated evidence locker, logging each transfer of possession in the official evidence log. Explanation: the scenario presents a common challenge for Cleveland Division of Police officers. balancing the need for efficient evidence processing with the strict legal requirements for maintaining the chain of custody. This requires careful judgment to ensure that departmental policies and Ohio Revised Code provisions regarding evidence handling are not compromised, which could lead to the exclusion of crucial evidence in court. The best approach involves meticulously documenting every transfer of the seized firearm, including the officer who collected it, the officer who transported it to the evidence locker, and any other personnel who accessed it. This detailed, contemporaneous record-keeping directly aligns with the principles of maintaining an unbroken chain of custody, as mandated by both Cleveland Police Department General Orders and Ohio Revised Code Section 2933. 81, which governs the handling and disposition of evidence. This thorough documentation ensures that the integrity of the evidence is preserved and can be reliably presented in legal proceedings, preventing challenges based on potential tampering or loss. An incorrect approach would be to rely on a general understanding of where the firearm was stored without specific documentation of its transfer. This failure to create a detailed log of each handler and transfer point creates significant gaps in the chain of custody. Such omissions violate Cleveland Police Department General Orders concerning evidence management and could be grounds for a motion to suppress the evidence under Ohio Rules of Evidence, as the prosecution would be unable to prove the evidence presented in court is the same evidence seized. Another incorrect approach would be to delegate the responsibility of initial evidence logging to a civilian evidence technician, without the arresting officer first securing and documenting the initial seizure. Civilian technicians play a vital role. The arresting officer is the first point of contact with the evidence, and their initial documentation is paramount. This bypasses the critical first step of officer accountability in the chain of custody, potentially leading to disputes about the evidence's origin and initial condition, and contravening established police procedure for evidence collection. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to assume that a general departmental storage location is sufficient without specific, individual item tracking. This overlooks the requirement for specific item identification and accountability within the evidence management system. Without this granular tracking, it becomes impossible to definitively link a specific firearm to a specific arrest or investigation, jeopardizing its admissibility in court and undermining the integrity of the justice process. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established protocols and legal mandates. This involves understanding the specific requirements of the Cleveland Police Department's General Orders on evidence handling and relevant Ohio Revised Code sections. Before any action is taken, officers should mentally review the steps required to maintain the chain of custody. If any doubt exists about the correct procedure, consulting a supervisor or the evidence custodian is the appropriate professional step. The guiding principle should always be to create a clear, verifiable, and legally defensible record of the evidence's journey from seizure to court presentation. Question 4. The investigation demonstrates that a backlog of unprocessed evidence has accumulated at the Cleveland Division of Police Evidence Locker, leading to delays in forensic analysis and potential compromises in the chain of custody. Which of the following approaches best addresses this situation while adhering to Ohio's legal standards for evidence handling and ensuring investigative integrity? Option A. Implement a revised evidence processing protocol that mandates immediate, detailed logging of all evidence upon receipt, including photographic documentation of its condition and secure, segregated storage, with a designated officer responsible for verifying the chain of custody at each transfer point. Option B. Prioritize the processing of evidence for high-profile cases, temporarily deferring the meticulous logging and secure storage of evidence from less severe offenses to expedite the overall throughput. Option C. Establish a system where investigators can temporarily store evidence in their personal workspaces until the evidence locker has capacity, allowing for quicker access for immediate investigative needs. Option D. Focus on clearing the backlog by only performing basic logging and immediate transfer to forensic units, with detailed documentation and secure storage to be completed only after initial analysis. The correct answer is A. Implement a revised evidence processing protocol that mandates immediate, detailed logging of all evidence upon receipt, including photographic documentation of its condition and secure, segregated storage, with a designated officer responsible for verifying the chain of custody at each transfer point. Explanation: the investigation demonstrates a critical need for efficient and effective evidence handling within the Cleveland Division of Police. This scenario is professionally challenging because it involves balancing the urgency of processing evidence to support ongoing investigations with the absolute necessity of maintaining the integrity and chain of custody of that evidence, as mandated by Ohio Revised Code and established police procedure. Failure in either aspect can lead to compromised investigations, wrongful acquittals, and a loss of public trust. The best professional practice involves a systematic and documented approach to evidence processing that prioritizes accuracy and adherence to established protocols. This includes immediate logging of all evidence upon receipt, meticulous documentation of its condition and location, and secure storage that prevents tampering or degradation. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with the legal requirements for evidence admissibility in Ohio courts, ensuring that evidence can be presented without challenge due to procedural errors. It upholds the principles of due process and the right to a fair trial by guaranteeing the reliability of the evidence presented. Furthermore, it fosters accountability within the department by creating a clear audit trail for every piece of evidence, an approach that prioritizes speed over meticulous documentation, such as quickly logging evidence without thoroughly checking for completeness or potential contamination, is professionally unacceptable. This failure risks rendering evidence inadmissible in court, thereby jeopardizing the prosecution of criminal cases. It violates the fundamental principles of evidence handling and the legal standards required in Ohio. Another professionally unacceptable approach involves storing evidence in an unsecured or disorganized manner to expedite retrieval for investigators. This practice creates a high risk of evidence loss, tampering, or cross-contamination, which can irrevocably damage the integrity of the evidence and the investigation. Such negligence directly contravenes the duty to preserve evidence and can lead to significant legal repercussions for the officers involved and the department. A further unacceptable approach is to delay the initial logging and processing of evidence due to perceived minor administrative burdens. This delay can create gaps in the chain of custody, making it difficult to account for the evidence's whereabouts and condition at all times. Such omissions can be exploited by defense attorneys to challenge the evidence's reliability, potentially leading to the exclusion of crucial evidence from trial. The professional decision-making process for handling evidence should involve a constant awareness of the legal and ethical obligations. Officers must understand that every step in the evidence handling process is critical and has potential legal ramifications. They should prioritize adherence to established protocols, seek clarification when unsure, and recognize that thoroughness and accuracy are paramount to the successful administration of justice. This involves a commitment to continuous training and a proactive approach to identifying and mitigating potential risks to evidence integrity. Question 5. Assessment of current patrol deployment strategies within the Cleveland Division of Police reveals potential inefficiencies. Considering the principles of process optimization and adherence to Ohio law, which of the following strategies would best enhance operational effectiveness and public safety? Option A. Reducing patrol hours uniformly across all divisions to achieve immediate cost savings, irrespective of specific area needs. Option B. Implementing a data-driven analysis of crime patterns and incident frequency to inform adjustments in patrol routes and staffing levels. Option C. Reallocating patrol resources based primarily on the subjective opinions of precinct supervisors regarding perceived crime hotspots. Option D. Increasing the overall number of officers on patrol across all districts without specific regard to localized crime data. Correct answer is B. Implementing a data-driven analysis of crime patterns and incident frequency to inform adjustments in patrol routes and staffing levels. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in law enforcement, balancing the need for efficient resource allocation with the imperative to uphold individual rights and due process. The Cleveland Division of Police, like any municipal police department in Ohio, operates under a framework of state statutes, local ordinances, and constitutional principles. The challenge lies in optimizing operational processes without compromising the integrity of investigations or infringing upon the rights of citizens. The most effective approach involves a systematic review of existing patrol deployment strategies, incorporating data analytics to identify patterns and areas of high incident frequency. This data-driven method allows for informed adjustments to patrol routes and staffing levels, ensuring resources are directed where they are most needed. This aligns with the principles of effective policing and resource management, aiming to maximize public safety outcomes while adhering to departmental policies and the Ohio Revised Code concerning police operations and accountability. This approach prioritizes evidence-based decision-making, a cornerstone of modern, professional law enforcement, an approach that solely focuses on increasing the number of officers on the street without a data-driven analysis risks inefficient resource allocation. This could lead to over-policing in low-crime areas and under-policing in high-crime areas, failing to optimize the impact of available personnel. Furthermore, it might not address the root causes of crime, which is a key aspect of community-oriented policing principle, often encouraged by the Ohio Association of Chiefs of Police. Another less effective approach would be to rely solely on anecdotal evidence or the personal preferences of supervisors when reallocating resources. This method is subjective and prone to bias, potentially leading to inequitable distribution of police services and failing to address actual crime trends as identified through objective data. Such an approach would not be in line with best practices for transparent and accountable policing, which are increasingly emphasized in Ohio's law enforcement community. A third ineffective approach might involve implementing a blanket reduction in patrol hours across all districts to save costs, without considering the specific needs and crime rates of each area. This could significantly compromise public safety in high-incident zones and negatively impact community trust, as residents may feel abandoned or underserved. This fails to acknowledge the dynamic nature of crime and the importance of tailored policing strategies. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining the problem or objective, e.g., optimizing patrol efficiency. This should be followed by gathering relevant data, incident reports, call logs, demographic information. Next, potential solutions or approaches should be brainstormed and evaluated against established criteria, including effectiveness, efficiency, legality, and ethical considerations, referencing relevant Ohio statutes and departmental policies. Finally, the chosen approach should be implemented, monitored, and adjusted as needed, ensuring continuous improvement and accountability. Question 6. Stakeholder feedback indicates a need to improve the efficiency of information gathering for ongoing investigations within the Cleveland Division of Police. An officer is investigating a suspect and believes a civilian acquaintance of the suspect may possess crucial information regarding the suspect's recent activities. The officer also knows the suspect's employer might have records of their work schedule. Considering the importance of adhering to the legal framework of Ohio and departmental policies, which of the following approaches best optimizes the process of obtaining necessary information while upholding legal and ethical standards? Option A. Formally request the information from the civilian acquaintance through a documented interview process, ensuring all legal advisements are provided if necessary, and formally request employment records from the suspect's employer through appropriate legal channels, such as a subpoena or court order, if warranted. Option B. Reach out to the suspect's employer directly to inquire about their work habits and potential whereabouts without seeking formal legal authorization. Option C. Contact the civilian acquaintance directly and informally question them about the suspect's activities, hoping to gain immediate insights. Option D. Share preliminary, unconfirmed details about the investigation with a colleague in another precinct who is not directly involved, seeking their informal opinion on how to proceed. The correct answer is A. Formally request the information from the civilian acquaintance through a documented interview process, ensuring all legal advisements are provided if necessary, and formally request employment records from the suspect's employer through appropriate legal channels, such as a subpoena or court order, if warranted. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for information with the legal and ethical obligations to protect individual privacy and ensure due process. Officers must act decisively while adhering strictly to the established legal framework governing evidence collection and information sharing within the Cleveland Division of Police. Failure to do so can lead to inadmissible evidence, disciplinary action, and erosion of public trust. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves obtaining information through established, legally sanctioned channels that respect the rights of individuals and the integrity of the investigation. This means formally requesting information from the relevant agency, such as the Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's Office, through official interagency communication protocols. This approach ensures that the information is obtained lawfully, is properly documented, and can be used in subsequent legal proceedings. It aligns with the principles of due process and the Ohio Rules of Criminal Procedure, which govern the acquisition and use of evidence. Incorrect approach is analysis. Seeking information directly from a civilian witness who is known to have a personal relationship with the suspect, without involving supervisory personnel or adhering to standard interview protocols, risks compromising the investigation. This could lead to the introduction of unreliable or inadmissible information, potentially violating the suspect's rights if the information is obtained coercively or without proper advisement. Bypasses established procedures designed to ensure the integrity of evidence and witness statements. Contacting the suspect's employer directly to inquire about their work habits and potential whereabouts, without a warrant or a clear legal basis, infringes upon privacy rights and could lead to civil liability for the department. This action bypasses the established legal mechanisms for obtaining such information, such as subpoenas or court orders, and could be seen as an unauthorized intrusion. Sharing preliminary, unconfirmed details about the ongoing investigation with a trusted colleague in another precinct who is not directly involved in the case, even with the intention of seeking advice, constitutes a breach of confidentiality. This unauthorized disclosure can jeopardize the investigation by potentially tipping off the suspect or their associates, and it violates departmental policies regarding the secure handling of sensitive case information. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal compliance, ethical conduct, and procedural integrity. When faced with a need for information, the first step is to identify the most appropriate and lawful method of acquisition. This involves consulting departmental policies, relevant state laws, in this case, Ohio law and Cleveland ordinances, and seeking guidance from supervisors or legal counsel when necessary. The focus should always be on maintaining the chain of custody for evidence and respecting the rights of all individuals involved. Question 7. Regulatory review indicates that officers of the Cleveland Division of Police have identified a potential suspect in a recent series of burglaries. Preliminary information suggests the suspect may be communicating with accomplices via a specific mobile phone number. To expedite the investigation and potentially apprehend the suspect, officers are considering methods to access the subscriber information and call logs associated with this number. Considering the legal and ethical framework governing law enforcement in Ohio, which approach best optimizes the investigative process while adhering to constitutional protections. Option A. Cease all investigative efforts related to the phone number until a clear and undeniable link to the burglaries is established through other means, to avoid any potential legal challenges regarding data access. Option B. Directly access the subscriber information and call logs from the telecommunications provider, believing that the urgency of the investigation justifies bypassing formal legal procedures. Option C. Obtain a search warrant from a judge or magistrate by demonstrating probable cause that the phone number is linked to criminal activity and that accessing subscriber information and call logs will yield evidence of the burglaries. Option D. Contact the telecommunications provider and request the information informally, explaining the situation and hoping for voluntary cooperation without any legal documentation. The correct answer is C. Obtain a search warrant from a judge or magistrate by demonstrating probable cause that the phone number is linked to criminal activity and that accessing subscriber information and call logs will yield evidence of the burglaries. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for information with the strict legal and ethical obligations surrounding evidence handling and privacy. Officers must act efficiently to investigate potential criminal activity, but cannot compromise the integrity of evidence or violate constitutional rights in the process. The Cleveland Division of Police operates under Ohio law and federal constitutional principles, demanding adherence to specific procedures for searches, seizures, and data access. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves obtaining a warrant based on probable cause before accessing the data. This approach respects the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, which protects against unreasonable searches and seizures, and aligns with Ohio's codified rules of criminal procedure regarding search warrants. A warrant ensures judicial oversight, requiring an independent magistrate to review the evidence supporting probable cause, thereby safeguarding individual privacy rights and ensuring the admissibility of the evidence in court. This methodical process prevents arbitrary intrusions and upholds the rule of law. Incorrect approaches analysis. Accessing the data without a warrant, even with the belief that it might contain evidence of a crime, constitutes a violation of the Fourth Amendment. This is an unlawful search and seizure, as it bypasses the requirement for probable cause and judicial authorization. Such an action would render any discovered evidence inadmissible under the exclusionary rule and could lead to disciplinary action and civil liability for the officers involved. Attempting to gain access through a pretextual or informal request to the telecommunications provider without proper legal process is also unacceptable. While it might seem like a shortcut, it circumvents established legal channels and lacks the necessary legal authority. Telecommunications providers are bound by federal and state laws, like the Stored Communications Act, which has implications even at the state level for data privacy, and cannot simply hand over subscriber data without a valid legal order, such as a warrant, subpoena, or court order. This approach risks alienating the provider and still results in an illegal search if data is obtained without proper authorization. Delaying the investigation indefinitely while waiting for a warrant, even if the initial suspicion is strong, is not the most effective approach to process optimization in this context. While a warrant is necessary for data access, a complete halt to all investigative activity is not optimal. Officers should continue to gather other forms of evidence that do not require intrusive data access, such as witness interviews or surveillance, while diligently pursuing the warrant. However, the core issue here is the asterisk method asterisk of data access, not the overall pace of the investigation. The primary failure is the consideration of unauthorized data access methods. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal compliance and ethical conduct. When faced with a situation requiring access to private data, the first step is to assess whether probable cause exists to justify a search. If probable cause is established, the next step is to initiate the legal process for obtaining the appropriate legal authority, which in this case, for accessing subscriber data from a telecommunications provider, is typically a search warrant. This process involves drafting an affidavit detailing the probable cause and presenting it to a judge or magistrate. Throughout the investigation, officers must remain aware of their constitutional obligations and the relevant state and federal laws governing searches, seizures, and data privacy. Question 8. Consider a scenario where Officer Miller, responding to a call, arrives at a scene where an arrest has just been made for illegal firearm possession in Cleveland, Ohio. The arresting officer hands Officer Miller the seized firearm, stating, "Take this to the precinct. I've got more calls." Officer Miller, eager to respond to other calls, places the firearm in his patrol car's passenger seat and proceeds directly to the police station. Which of the following actions best upholds the integrity of the evidence and departmental procedures? Option A. Officer Miller places the firearm in his personal patrol car for transport to the precinct, intending to log it upon arrival. Option B. Officer Miller stores the firearm in an unsecured location within the precinct, such as his desk drawer, while awaiting processing. Option C. Officer Miller immediately logs the transfer of the firearm from the arresting officer into the departmental evidence system, noting the details of the transfer, and then secures the firearm in an approved evidence locker at the precinct. Option D. Officer Miller hands the firearm directly to a civilian evidence technician at the scene without any formal documentation of the transfer. The correct answer is C. Officer Miller immediately logs the transfer of the firearm from the arresting officer into the departmental evidence system, noting the details of the transfer, and then secures the firearm in an approved evidence locker at the precinct. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for information with the established legal and ethical protocols governing evidence handling and chain of custody within the Cleveland Division of Police. Failure to adhere to these protocols can compromise the integrity of evidence, potentially leading to inadmissible evidence in court and undermining the justice process. The core tension lies between expediency and due process. The best approach involves meticulously documenting the transfer of the seized firearm. This means ensuring that Officer Miller, upon receiving the firearm from the arresting officer, completes all necessary departmental forms detailing the transfer, including the date, time, his badge number, and the badge number of the officer relinquishing custody. He must then secure the firearm in an approved evidence locker or designated secure area as per Cleveland Division of Police policy. This method is correct because it directly upholds the principles of chain of custody, a fundamental legal requirement for evidence admissibility in Ohio courts. Proper documentation and secure storage prevent tampering, loss, or unauthorized access, thereby preserving the integrity of the evidence and ensuring its reliability for prosecution. This aligns with the Ohio rules of evidence concerning the authentication of evidence. An incorrect approach would be to immediately place the firearm in his personal patrol car for transport to the precinct, without any formal documentation of the transfer. This is professionally unacceptable because it bypasses the critical chain of custody documentation, without a record of who had possession of the firearm and when its integrity is compromised. This could lead to challenges regarding its authenticity and admissibility in court, potentially jeopardizing the case against the suspect. It violates standard operating procedures designed to prevent evidence contamination or manipulation. Another incorrect approach would be to hand the firearm directly to a civilian evidence technician at the scene without logging the transfer into the departmental system. While involving a civilian technician might seem efficient, it still requires proper documentation of the transfer from the arresting officer to the technician, and then to the secure evidence storage. Skipping this formal handover process, even with a designated technician, creates a gap in the chain of custody. This failure to document the transfer at each stage is a significant procedural error that can render the evidence unreliable. A final incorrect approach would be to store the firearm in an unsecured location within the precinct, such as an unlocked desk drawer, while awaiting processing. This is fundamentally flawed as it fails to provide the necessary security for seized evidence. The Cleveland Division of Police, like all law enforcement agencies, has strict protocols for evidence storage to prevent unauthorized access, theft, or damage. Storing evidence in an unsecured manner directly contravenes these protocols and severely compromises the integrity of the evidence, making it vulnerable to tampering and inadmissible in court. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established protocols and legal requirements. This involves understanding the critical importance of chain of custody, meticulously following departmental procedures for evidence handling and documentation, and prioritizing secure storage. When faced with time constraints, the professional should recognize that proper procedure, while potentially taking slightly longer, is essential for the integrity of the investigation and the pursuit of justice. If unsure about a specific protocol, consulting with a supervisor or the evidence custodian is the appropriate course of action. Question 9. Upon reviewing the operational efficiency of the Cleveland Division of Police, what is the most effective and ethically sound method for optimizing patrol deployment and response times to better serve the community? Option A. Increase the overall number of officers assigned to patrol shifts across all districts without specific analysis of current deployment needs. Option B. Rapidly deploy new patrol technologies and software systems, assuming they will inherently improve efficiency without extensive prior analysis or training. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive data analysis of call volume, incident types, geographic distribution, and historical response times to identify patterns and inform strategic adjustments to patrol routes and staffing. Option D. Implement new patrol strategies based on the anecdotal feedback and personal observations of a select group of veteran officers. Correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive data analysis of call volume, incident types, geographic distribution, and historical response times to identify patterns and inform strategic adjustments to patrol routes and staffing. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in law enforcement, balancing the need for efficient resource allocation with the imperative to uphold constitutional rights and departmental policy. The Cleveland Division of Police, like any municipal law enforcement agency, operates under a strict framework of federal constitutional law, primarily the Fourth Amendment concerning searches and seizures, and Ohio state statutes governing police conduct. Furthermore, internal departmental policies and procedures are designed to translate these legal mandates into practical operational guidelines. The challenge lies in identifying and implementing process optimizations that enhance effectiveness without compromising these fundamental legal and ethical obligations. The best approach involves a systematic review of existing patrol patterns and response times, utilizing data analytics to identify inefficiencies and potential areas for improvement. This approach prioritizes data-driven decision-making, which is crucial for objective and defensible process optimization. By analyzing metrics such as call volume by geographic area, average response times to different incident types, and officer deployment patterns, leadership can identify specific zones or times that are underserved or oversourced. This allows for targeted adjustments to patrol routes, staffing levels, or specialized unit deployment, all aimed at improving service delivery and officer safety. This method aligns with the principles of good governance and accountability, ensuring that changes are based on evidence rather than anecdotal observations or assumptions. It also respects the legal framework by focusing on operational efficiency that ultimately supports the department's mission to protect and serve the citizens of Cleveland, thereby indirectly reinforcing constitutional protections by ensuring resources are deployed effectively to address community needs. An approach that focuses solely on increasing the number of officers on patrol without a data-driven analysis of where and when they are most needed is flawed. This could lead to inefficient deployment, potentially increasing overtime costs without a commensurate improvement in service or safety. It risks concentrating resources in areas that do not experience the highest call volumes or crime rates, thus failing to optimize the use of limited personnel. Another problematic approach would be to implement changes based on the personal preferences or anecdotal experiences of a few senior officers without broader data validation. While experienced officers offer valuable insights, relying solely on subjective input can lead to biased decisions that do not reflect the overall operational landscape or community needs. This can result in process changes that are not truly optimized and may even create new inefficiencies or inequities. Finally, an approach that prioritizes rapid implementation of new technologies or strategies without adequate training, policy review, or consideration of their impact on existing workflows is also professionally unsound. While innovation is important, it must be integrated thoughtfully. Rushing implementation without proper planning can lead to confusion, errors, and a failure to achieve the intended benefits, potentially undermining public trust and operational effectiveness. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that begins with clearly defining the problem or area for optimization. This should be followed by data collection and analysis to understand the current state and identify root causes of inefficiency. Next, potential solutions should be brainstormed and evaluated based on their feasibility, cost-effectiveness, and most importantly, their alignment with legal mandates, departmental policies, and ethical principles. Pilot testing and ongoing evaluation are essential to ensure that implemented changes achieve the desired outcomes and to make further adjustments as needed. Question 10. When evaluating staffing levels for the Cleveland Division of Police's patrol units to optimize response times and operational efficiency within the upcoming fiscal year's budget, which of the following calculations would best inform a data-driven decision regarding the number of patrol cars needed per shift? Option A. Estimate the number of patrol cars needed based on the number of supervisors available to oversee patrol operations. Option B. Determine the total number of patrol officers available at the beginning of the fiscal year and divide this by the number of shifts to be covered. Option C. Increase the number of patrol cars deployed by 10% across all shifts to proactively address potential increases in crime. Option D. Calculate the average number of officers required per patrol car to achieve a target response time of 5 minutes for Priority 1 calls, given an average of 15 Priority 1 calls per 8-hour shift and an average of 2 officers per patrol car. The correct answer is D. Calculate the average number of officers required per patrol car to achieve a target response time of 5 minutes for Priority 1 calls, given an average of 15 Priority 1 calls per 8-hour shift and an average of 2 officers per patrol car. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in law enforcement where resource allocation directly impacts operational efficiency and public safety. Need to balance immediate response needs with long-term strategic planning, while adhering to budgetary constraints requires a data-driven and analytical approach. Misjudging these factors can lead to inefficient deployment of officers, delayed response times to critical incidents, and potential understaffing in areas with higher crime rates, all of which compromise the Cleveland Division of Police's mission. Correct approach analysis. The best approach involves a systematic, data-driven analysis of historical incident data and projected needs. This includes calculating the average response time for different types of calls, the number of officers required to maintain optimal coverage during peak hours, and the cost-effectiveness of various staffing models. For instance, calculating the average number of officers needed per shift to maintain a target response time of under 5 minutes for Priority 1 calls, considering an average of 15 Priority 1 calls per 8-hour shift and an average of 2 officers per patrol car, would be a critical step. This approach aligns with principles of efficient resource management and evidence-based policing, ensuring that staffing decisions are grounded in objective data rather than subjective assumptions. The Cleveland Division of Police, like any public service agency, is ethically and professionally obligated to utilize taxpayer funds efficiently and effectively to maximize public safety. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to simply increase the number of patrol cars deployed during all shifts without a thorough analysis of call volume or response time data. This is inefficient as it may lead to overstaffing during low-demand periods, increasing personnel costs without a proportional increase in service delivery. It fails to optimize resource allocation and could divert funds from other critical areas. Another incorrect approach would be to base staffing decisions solely on the number of officers available at the start of a fiscal year, without considering fluctuations in call volume or the need for specialized units. This reactive approach ignores the dynamic nature of policing and can lead to understaffing during peak times or overstaffing during lulls, impacting both officer workload and public safety. A third incorrect approach would be to prioritize staffing based on anecdotal evidence or the personal preferences of supervisors without quantitative data. This subjective method is prone to bias and does not guarantee optimal deployment. It fails to meet the professional standard of accountability and transparency expected of a public service organization like the Cleveland Division of Police. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a data-driven decision-making framework. This involves 1. Defining the problem and objectives, e.g., optimizing response times, managing budget. 2. Gathering relevant data, e.g., historical call data, staffing levels, budget constraints. 3. Analyzing the data to identify patterns and trends. 4. Developing and evaluating potential solutions, e.g., different staffing models, shift schedules. 5. Implementing the chosen solution and monitoring its effectiveness. 6. Making adjustments as needed based on ongoing performance metrics. This systematic process ensures that decisions are informed, justifiable, and aligned with the organization's mission and public trust. Question 11. The analysis reveals a situation where a Cleveland Division of Police officer arrives at a reported disturbance. Upon arrival, the officer observes signs of a struggle and a potential witness attempting to leave the scene. What is the most effective and legally sound approach for the officer to manage this situation to optimize the investigative process? Option A. Immediately detain and question the witness to obtain their account of the disturbance before addressing the scene. Option B. Secure the scene to preserve potential evidence, then approach the witness to gather information while ensuring the scene is not compromised. Option C. Focus solely on collecting any visible physical evidence at the scene without engaging the witness. Option D. Make an initial assessment of the situation and detain any individuals present based on suspicion before securing the scene. The correct answer is B. Secure the scene to preserve potential evidence, then approach the witness to gather information while ensuring the scene is not compromised. Explanation. The analysis reveals a scenario where a Cleveland Division of Police officer must balance the immediate need for information with the procedural requirements for evidence handling and the constitutional rights of individuals. This situation is professionally challenging because it requires rapid decision-making under pressure, where a misstep can compromise an investigation, lead to the suppression of crucial evidence, or violate an individual's rights, potentially leading to disciplinary action or legal repercussions for the officer and the department. The officer must understand the nuances of obtaining information versus securing admissible evidence. The best approach involves prioritizing the immediate safety and securing of the scene, followed by a systematic process of documenting observations and initiating formal investigative procedures, including the proper collection and preservation of any potential evidence. This aligns with the principles of due process and the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, which protect against unreasonable searches and seizures. By securing the scene and initiating formal procedures, the officer ensures that any information or evidence gathered is obtained legally and can be used effectively in subsequent investigations or court proceedings. This methodical approach respects individual rights while maximizing the potential for a successful investigation, an approach that involves immediately questioning individuals without first securing the scene or considering the admissibility of their statements as evidence is procedurally flawed. While obtaining information quickly might seem beneficial, if the scene is not secured, potential evidence could be contaminated or lost, rendering it unusable. Furthermore, statements obtained under duress or without proper advisement of rights could be deemed inadmissible in court, undermining the investigative efforts. Another incorrect approach would be to focus solely on collecting physical evidence without adequately documenting the circumstances or considering the potential for witness or suspect statements. While physical evidence is critical, the context in which it is found and any accompanying statements are equally important for building a comprehensive case. Neglecting these aspects can lead to an incomplete or unconvocable investigation. Finally, an approach that involves making assumptions about guilt based on initial observations without following established investigative protocols is ethically and legally unsound. This can lead to biased investigations and the potential wrongful accusation of individuals, violating fundamental principles of justice and fairness. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes scene security, adherence to constitutional rights, and the systematic application of investigative procedures. This involves a clear understanding of the legal boundaries for searches, seizures, and interrogations, as well as the importance of meticulous documentation and evidence preservation. When faced with complex situations, officers should rely on their training, departmental policies, and, if necessary, seek guidance from supervisors or legal counsel to ensure all actions are lawful and ethically sound. Question 12. Governance review demonstrates a recurring issue within the Cleveland Division of Police regarding the timely and accurate reporting of use-of-force incidents. Considering the legal and ethical obligations of law enforcement in Ohio, which of the following approaches best addresses this challenge? Option A. Implement a mandatory, immediate review of all use-of-force reports by a supervisor upon submission to ensure completeness and accuracy against Cleveland Division of Police policies and Ohio Revised Code. Option B. Rely exclusively on the officer's initial written report without any independent verification or supervisory oversight. Option C. Delay the review of use-of-force reports until a formal complaint is filed concerning the incident. Option D. Prioritize the immediate return of officers to patrol duties over the thorough and accurate completion of use-of-force reports. The correct answer is A. Implement a mandatory, immediate review of all use-of-force reports by a supervisor upon submission to ensure completeness and accuracy against Cleveland Division of Police policies and Ohio Revised Code. Explanation. Governance review demonstrates a recurring issue within the Cleveland Division of Police regarding the timely and accurate reporting of use-of-force incidents. This scenario is professionally challenging because it directly impacts public trust, accountability, and the effectiveness of internal oversight mechanisms. Failure to adhere to reporting protocols can lead to a lack of transparency, hinder investigations into potential misconduct, and prevent the identification of systemic issues that may require policy changes or additional training. Careful judgment is required to balance the immediate demands of policing with the critical administrative and legal obligations of reporting. The approach that represents best professional practice involves a proactive and systematic review of all use-of-force reports immediately following an incident. This includes verifying the completeness and accuracy of the information against established Cleveland Division of Police policies and Ohio Revised Code requirements concerning use-of-force documentation. This approach is correct because it ensures that all mandatory reporting elements are captured promptly, minimizing the risk of omissions or inaccuracies that could compromise subsequent investigations or departmental reviews. Adherence to these established procedures is a fundamental ethical and legal obligation, designed to uphold accountability and ensure that the division operates within the bounds of state law and departmental directives. An approach that involves delaying the review of use of force reports until a formal complaint is filed is professionally unacceptable. This failure to proactively review and document incidents violates the Cleveland Division of Police's internal policies and potentially Ohio revised code provisions that mandate timely reporting of such events, creates a significant ethical lapse by allowing potential issues to go unaddressed until external pressure is applied, undermining the principle of self-governance and accountability. Another professionally unacceptable approach is to rely solely on the officer's initial written report without any independent verification or supervisory review. This method neglects the critical oversight function of supervisors and can lead to the perpetuation of incomplete or biased reporting. It fails to meet the ethical standard of ensuring accuracy and completeness in official records, which is essential for maintaining public trust and facilitating fair investigations. Finally, an approach that prioritizes the immediate return of officers to patrol duties over the thorough and accurate completion of use-of-force reports is ethically and legally flawed. While operational readiness is important, it cannot supersede the legal and ethical mandate to document critical incidents. This approach risks creating a culture where administrative responsibilities are seen as secondary, potentially leading to significant legal and accountability issues for the division and its officers. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established policies and legal mandates. This involves understanding the critical importance of accurate and timely reporting as a cornerstone of accountability and public trust. When faced with competing demands, the framework should guide officers and supervisors to recognize that legal and ethical obligations related to reporting are non-negotiable and must be integrated into daily operations, not treated as an afterthought. A commitment to transparency and thorough documentation, even when inconvenient, is paramount. Question 13. Implementation of data analytics for proactive crime prevention in Cleveland, Ohio, presents an opportunity to optimize police resource allocation. Which of the following strategies best balances efficiency gains with legal and ethical considerations for the Cleveland Division of Police? Option A. Utilize publicly available social media data to create profiles of individuals exhibiting suspicious online behavior without specific warrants to inform patrol assignments. Option B. Develop and implement clear departmental policies for data acquisition, analysis, and use, including rigorous validation of any predictive models for bias and accuracy, and establish a regular review process for these models and policies. Option C. Immediately deploy advanced data mining software to identify potential crime hotspots and allocate patrol units based solely on the software's output to maximize visible police presence. Option D. Focus on increasing arrest statistics by prioritizing data analysis that identifies individuals with prior minor offenses for increased surveillance and stops. The correct answer is B. Develop and implement clear departmental policies for data acquisition, analysis, and use, including rigorous validation of any predictive models for bias and accuracy, and establish a regular review process for these models and policies. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in law enforcement, balancing the need for efficient resource allocation with the imperative to uphold constitutional rights and departmental policy. The Cleveland Division of Police operates under specific Ohio revised code provisions and departmental general orders that govern the use of technology and data analysis in investigations. The professional challenge lies in ensuring that data-driven approaches, while potentially optimizing investigative processes, do not infringe upon privacy rights or lead to biased outcomes, which could result in legal challenges and erode public trust. Careful judgment is required to select methods that are both effective and legally sound. The best approach involves a systematic, policy-driven implementation of data analysis tools that prioritizes transparency, accountability, and adherence to established legal frameworks. This includes conducting thorough impact assessments, developing clear guidelines for data collection and usage, and ensuring that any predictive policing models are validated for accuracy and fairness, with mechanisms for regular review and adjustment. This aligns with the principles of due process and equal protection under the law, as well as departmental mandates for responsible use of technology. The focus is on proactive compliance and risk mitigation, ensuring that process optimization serves, rather than undermines, the core mission of public safety and justice. An approach that focuses solely on the potential for increased arrest rates, without considering the legal and ethical implications of the data sources or analytical methods, is professionally unacceptable. It overlooks the requirement for probable cause and reasonable suspicion in investigative actions, potentially leading to unlawful stops or searches. Furthermore, relying on unvalidated or biased algorithms can perpetuate systemic inequalities, violating principles of fairness and equal treatment. Another professionally unacceptable approach is the uncritical adoption of new technologies without adequate training or oversight. This can lead to misuse of data, misinterpretation of results, and a failure to comply with data privacy regulations. Without established protocols for data security and retention, departments risk breaches and legal repercussions. Finally, an approach that prioritizes speed and efficiency over thoroughness and legal review is detrimental. While process optimization aims to improve efficiency, it must not come at the expense of constitutional rights or established investigative procedures. This can lead to compromised investigations and wrongful accusations. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the legal and policy landscape governing their actions. This involves identifying the objectives of process optimization, evaluating potential technological solutions against these objectives and legal constraints, and conducting a risk assessment. The chosen approach must be demonstrably fair, effective, and compliant with all applicable laws and departmental policies, with built-in mechanisms for ongoing evaluation and adaptation. Question 14. To address the challenge of optimizing resource allocation and operational effectiveness within the Cleveland Division of Police, which of the following strategies best balances efficiency gains with the imperative to uphold citizen privacy and due process in Ohio? Option A. Significantly increase the volume of data collected from all available sources, assuming that more data will inherently lead to better operational insights and resource allocation decisions. Option B. Prioritize the adoption of the latest predictive policing software without first establishing clear guidelines on data input, algorithmic transparency, or officer training on its ethical application. Option C. Implement a comprehensive data governance framework that includes clear protocols for data collection, usage, storage, and retention, coupled with mandatory officer training on data privacy and ethical data handling, and establish regular audits for compliance and continuous improvement. Option D. Rely primarily on the experience and intuition of senior officers to identify areas for process improvement, with minimal emphasis on formal data analysis or standardized protocols. The correct answer is C. Implement a comprehensive data governance framework that includes clear protocols for data collection, usage, storage, and retention, coupled with mandatory officer training on data privacy and ethical data handling, and establish regular audits for compliance and continuous improvement. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in law enforcement, balancing the need for efficient resource allocation with the imperative to uphold individual rights and due process. Specifically, the Cleveland Division of Police must navigate the complexities of data management and analysis to improve operational effectiveness without compromising the privacy and civil liberties of citizens. This requires a nuanced understanding of data governance, ethical considerations, and the legal framework governing police operations in Ohio. The most effective approach involves a systematic, data-driven strategy that prioritizes transparency, accountability, and adherence to established legal and ethical guidelines. This approach begins with a thorough assessment of current data collection and analysis processes, identifying bottlenecks and areas for improvement. It then involves developing clear protocols for data usage, storage, and retention, ensuring compliance with Ohio Revised Code and relevant federal statutes. Crucially, this method emphasizes the importance of training officers on data privacy and ethical data handling, fostering a culture of responsible data stewardship. The integration of feedback mechanisms and regular audits further strengthens this approach by ensuring continuous improvement and accountability. This aligns with the principles of good governance and the ethical obligations of law enforcement to serve and protect the public while respecting their rights. An approach that focuses solely on increasing data collection without establishing clear guidelines for its use or ensuring officer training on privacy concerns is fundamentally flawed. This can lead to overreach, potential misuse of information, and erosion of public trust, violating principles of due process and privacy rights. Similarly, an approach that relies heavily on anecdotal evidence or intuition rather than systematic data analysis risks perpetuating biases and inefficiencies. It fails to leverage the power of data for objective decision-making and process optimization. Finally, an approach that prioritizes technological solutions without addressing the human element, officer training, ethical considerations, and community engagement is incomplete. Technology is a tool, and its effectiveness is contingent on responsible human oversight and adherence to legal and ethical standards. Professionals in law enforcement should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining the problem or objective. This should be followed by an objective assessment of existing processes and data. Next, potential solutions should be evaluated not only for their efficiency, but also for their legal and ethical implications, considering the specific regulatory landscape of Ohio. Implementation should be accompanied by robust training and clear communication. Finally, continuous monitoring, evaluation, and adaptation based on feedback and performance metrics are essential for sustained improvement and accountability. Question 15. Examination of the data shows a Cleveland police officer is responding to a call regarding suspicious activity in a residential neighborhood. Upon arrival, the officer observes an individual standing near a parked vehicle, looking agitated. The officer approaches the individual, and without articulating specific reasons to believe the individual is armed or has committed a crime, asks to search the vehicle. Which of the following represents the most appropriate decision-making framework for the officer in this scenario? Option A. Detain the individual and the vehicle for an extended period to investigate further, even without specific evidence of a crime. Option B. Proceed with a search of the vehicle based on the officer's intuition that something is amiss, regardless of the individual's consent. Option C. Clearly explain the reason for the approach. Request voluntary consent to search the vehicle and respect the individual's decision if consent is refused. Option D. Immediately conduct a pat-down search of the individual and the vehicle for any contraband or weapons based on the agitated demeanor. The correct answer is C. Clearly explain the reason for the approach, request voluntary consent to search the vehicle, and respect the individual's decision if consent is refused. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge for law enforcement officers in Cleveland, Ohio, balancing the immediate need for information with the legal and ethical obligations to protect individual rights. The professional challenge lies in discerning when and how to gather information without infringing upon the rights of individuals, particularly when dealing with potentially sensitive situations. Careful judgment is required to navigate the nuances of the Ohio Revised Code and departmental policies regarding searches, seizures, and interactions with the public. The best approach involves a measured and legally sound method of information gathering. This approach prioritizes obtaining consent or establishing probable cause before conducting any intrusive search. Specifically, it involves clearly articulating the need for information, explaining the scope of the request, and respecting the individual's right to refuse consent. This aligns with the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, as interpreted by Ohio courts, which protects against unreasonable searches and seizures. Departmental policies in Cleveland likely reinforce these constitutional protections, emphasizing lawful procedures and respect for individual liberties. By seeking consent first, officers demonstrate a commitment to upholding these legal standards and building community trust. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with a search based on a mere hunch or a vague suspicion, without sufficient legal justification. This could involve conducting a pat-down search without reasonable suspicion that the person is armed and dangerous, or attempting to search a vehicle without probable cause or consent. Such actions would violate the Fourth Amendment and potentially Ohio Revised Code sections related to search and seizure, leading to the suppression of any evidence obtained and disciplinary action against the officer. Another incorrect approach would be to pressure or coerce an individual into consenting to a search. While consent must be voluntary, officers must avoid any actions that could be construed as coercive, as this would render the consent invalid and the search unlawful. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with assessing the situation and identifying the legal basis for any proposed action. This involves considering whether reasonable suspicion or probable cause exists. If such grounds are absent, the next step is to explore consensual avenues for information gathering, ensuring that any consent obtained is voluntary and informed. If consent is refused or not possible, officers must refrain from intrusive actions unless legally justified. Throughout the process, officers should be mindful of departmental policies and constitutional protections, documenting their actions and the legal rationale behind them. Question 16. Research into the conduct of officers in Cleveland, Ohio, indicates a scenario where an officer observes two individuals in a public park late at night, engaged in hushed conversation and frequently looking around. The individuals appear to be exchanging small, unmarked packages. What is the most appropriate initial course of action for the officer to take, adhering to Ohio law and constitutional principles? Option A. Attempt to covertly record the individual's conversation from a concealed position to gather evidence of their activities. Option B. Ignore the individuals as their behavior does not clearly indicate a crime is being committed. Option C. Immediately approach the individuals, identify themselves as a police officer, and demand to know what they are doing and what is in the packages. Option D. Maintain a discreet distance and observe the individual's behavior and interactions for a period to gather more information before deciding on any further action. Correct answer is D. Maintain a discreet distance and observe the individual's behavior and interactions for a period to gather more information before deciding on any further action. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for an officer in Cleveland, Ohio, due to the inherent tension between the need to gather information for a potential investigation and the constitutional rights of individuals. The officer must exercise sound judgment to balance investigative needs with the protection of privacy and due process, as mandated by Ohio law and the U.S. Constitution. The potential for misinterpretation of actions or statements, and the subsequent impact on an investigation or an individual's rights, makes careful decision-making paramount. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a measured approach that prioritizes lawful information gathering while respecting individual rights. This means observing the situation from a distance, noting observable behaviors and interactions without direct intervention, unless there is a clear indication of criminal activity or an immediate threat. This approach aligns with the principles of probable cause and reasonable suspicion, ensuring that any subsequent actions are legally justified and do not infringe upon the rights of individuals in Cleveland. It allows for the collection of objective evidence that can be used to establish reasonable suspicion or probable cause if further action is warranted, adhering to the standards set forth by Ohio law and relevant court decisions. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to immediately approach the individuals and question them directly about their activities without any observable suspicious behavior or articulable facts suggesting criminal conduct. This could be construed as an unlawful stop or detention under the Fourth Amendment, potentially violating the rights of the individuals and jeopardizing any evidence gathered. Ohio law requires reasonable suspicion to justify such an interaction. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the situation entirely, even if the observed behavior, while not definitively criminal, raises a degree of concern that warrants further, non-intrusive observation. This could be a missed opportunity to gather information that might prevent future criminal activity or assist in an ongoing investigation, failing to uphold the officer's duty to protect and serve the community of Cleveland. A third incorrect approach is to attempt to surreptitiously record the individual's conversations without their consent or a warrant, especially if the individuals are in a location where they have a reasonable expectation of privacy. This would likely violate Ohio's wiretapping laws and constitutional privacy protections, rendering any obtained information inadmissible and exposing the officer and the department to legal repercussions. Professional reasoning. Professionals in law enforcement should employ a decision-making framework that begins with an objective assessment of the situation. This involves identifying observable facts and behaviors, and then evaluating them against established legal standards for interaction, such as reasonable suspicion or probable cause. If these standards are not met, the default action should be passive observation or disengagement, unless there is an immediate threat to safety. If reasonable suspicion exists, a brief, non-intrusive inquiry may be permissible. Any further action, such as a detention or search, must be supported by probable cause or other legally recognized exceptions. Throughout this process, officers must remain mindful of constitutional rights and departmental policies, documenting all actions and justifications meticulously. Question 17. Which approach would be most appropriate for a Cleveland police officer responding to a call about a suspected drug transaction in a public park, where the officer observes an individual attempting to conceal a small package as they approach? Option A. Question the individual extensively about the package and their activities, using the information gathered to justify a search without obtaining a warrant. Option B. Conduct a full search of the individual and their belongings without a warrant, assuming the suspicious concealment constitutes probable cause for an arrest and search. Option C. Immediately secure the individual and the immediate area to prevent the destruction of evidence, then request a supervisor and begin the process of obtaining a warrant based on the observed suspicious activity and the potential for illegal contraband. Option D. Wait for backup to arrive and observe the situation further before taking any action, to avoid any potential accusations of overreach. The correct answer is C. Immediately secure the individual and the immediate area to prevent the destruction of evidence, then request a supervisor and begin the process of obtaining a warrant based on the observed suspicious activity and the potential for illegal contraband. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge for law enforcement officers in Cleveland, Ohio, balancing the immediate need for information with the legal and ethical obligations to protect individual rights. The officer must make a rapid decision that could significantly impact the course of an investigation and the admissibility of evidence, all while operating within the strict confines of Ohio law and constitutional principles. The professional challenge lies in the inherent tension between investigative urgency and the procedural safeguards designed to prevent overreach. The approach that represents best professional practice involves prioritizing the immediate safety of the public and the officer, while simultaneously initiating steps to legally secure potential evidence. This means acting decisively to neutralize any immediate threat, then promptly seeking the necessary legal authorization to search for and seize evidence. This aligns with the Fourth Amendment's protection against unreasonable searches and seizures, as interpreted by Ohio courts, which generally requires probable cause and a warrant for searches, with specific exceptions. The ethical imperative is to uphold the law and individual liberties even under pressure, an approach that bypasses legal procedures to obtain information, such as conducting a search without probable cause or a warrant when no exigent circumstances are present, represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This violates the fundamental right to privacy and due process guaranteed by the Ohio Constitution and the U.S. Constitution. Such an action could lead to the suppression of evidence, jeopardizing the investigation and potentially allowing a perpetrator to evade justice due to procedural errors. Another professionally unacceptable approach would be to delay necessary action to address an immediate threat to public safety in order to meticulously prepare a warrant application. While warrants are crucial, the law recognizes exceptions for situations where immediate action is required to prevent harm or the destruction of evidence. Failing to act when faced with a clear and present danger is a dereliction of duty and an ethical failure. Finally, an approach that relies solely on the suspect's consent without independently verifying the existence of probable cause for a search, especially if the consent is obtained under duress or coercion, is also problematic. While consent can be a valid basis for a search, officers must ensure it is freely and voluntarily given and should still be guided by the principle of probable cause to justify the initial stop and interaction. The professional reasoning process for officers in Cleveland should involve a rapid assessment of the situation, focusing on immediate threats to safety, the potential for evidence destruction, and the legal basis for any proposed action. This requires a thorough understanding of the exceptions to the warrant requirement under Ohio law, such as exigent circumstances, plain view, and lawful consent. When in doubt, officers should err on the side of caution and seek legal guidance or a warrant whenever feasible, always documenting their actions and the justification for them. Question 18. The evaluation methodology shows that when responding to a call in Cleveland regarding a disturbance where a caller reports a person exhibiting erratic behavior and possibly holding an object, what is the most prudent course of action for an officer to take upon arrival? Option A. Approach the individual cautiously, attempt to de-escalate the situation through verbal communication, and simultaneously request backup and further information from dispatch. Option B. Proceed with a forceful intervention based solely on the initial report of erratic behavior and the presence of an object, without attempting de-escalation. Option C. Immediately confront the individual with a show of force to assert authority and prevent potential escalation. Option D. Wait at a safe distance for a significant period to observe the individual's behavior and gather more detailed information before making any approach. The correct answer is A. Approach the individual cautiously, attempt to de-escalate the situation through verbal communication, and simultaneously request backup and further information from dispatch. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows that effective decision-making in law enforcement requires a structured approach that prioritizes public safety, adherence to legal statutes, and ethical conduct. This scenario is professionally challenging because Officer Miller faces a situation with immediate potential for harm, conflicting information, and the need to act decisively without complete certainty. The pressure to respond quickly, coupled with the possibility of misinterpreting the situation, necessitates a robust decision-making framework. The best approach involves Officer Miller immediately assessing the immediate threat to public safety and initiating de-escalation tactics, while simultaneously requesting backup and additional information. This prioritizes the preservation of life and the prevention of further harm. By focusing on de-escalation, Officer Miller attempts to resolve the situation peacefully, which aligns with the Cleveland Division of Police's commitment to community policing and minimizing the use of force. Simultaneously requesting backup ensures that adequate resources are available to manage the situation safely and effectively. And gathering more information allows for more informed and appropriate response, adhering to the principles of due process and lawful intervention. This methodical approach balances immediate action with careful consideration of all factors, reflecting best practices in law enforcement decision-making. An incorrect approach would be to immediately confront the individual without attempting de-escalation or requesting backup. This fails to prioritize the safety of the officer and the public by potentially escalating the situation unnecessarily. It also bypasses the crucial step of gathering more information, which could lead to a misjudgment and an inappropriate use of force, violating ethical guidelines and potentially departmental policy. Another incorrect approach would be to delay intervention significantly to gather extensive information before any action is taken. While information gathering is important, a prolonged delay in a situation with potential for immediate danger could result in preventable harm to victims or the public, demonstrating a failure to act with reasonable diligence and a disregard for the duty to protect. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to rely solely on the initial, potentially incomplete, information and proceed with a forceful intervention without attempting de-escalation or seeking further intelligence. This demonstrates a lack of critical thinking and a failure to adapt to evolving circumstances, potentially leading to an unjustified use of force and a breach of public trust. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that includes 1. Situation assessment. Quickly evaluate the immediate threat and potential for harm. 2. Tactical options. Consider a range of responses, prioritizing de-escalation and minimizing force. 3. Information gathering. Continuously seek and analyze relevant information. 4. Resource management. Request and utilize appropriate backup and support. 5. Legal and ethical review. Ensure all actions comply with laws, policies, and ethical standards. Question 19. Operational review demonstrates that a Cleveland police officer observes an individual standing near a closed business late at night, appearing agitated and pacing. The individual makes furtive movements towards their waistband. The officer has no prior information about this individual or the business. What is the most appropriate initial course of action for the officer to take, adhering to Ohio law and constitutional principles? Option A. Immediately order the individual to stop and place their hands on their head, preparing to conduct a pat-down search for weapons due to the furtive movements. Option B. Approach the individual aggressively, demanding to know what they are doing and why they are agitated, to establish control of the situation. Option C. Radio for backup and maintain a safe distance, observing the individual from afar until more information can be gathered or backup arrives. Option D. Approach the individual cautiously, observe their behavior, and if appropriate, initiate a non-confrontational conversation to ascertain their reason for being in the area and their actions. The correct answer is D. Approach the individual cautiously, observe their behavior, and if appropriate, initiate a non-confrontational conversation to ascertain their reason for being in the area and their actions. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between immediate public safety concerns and the procedural rights of an individual. Officers must exercise sound judgment to balance these competing interests while adhering to the established legal framework. The Cleveland Division of Police operates under Ohio law and federal constitutional principles, requiring a decision-making process that prioritizes lawful conduct and respect for individual liberties. The correct approach involves a systematic assessment of the situation, prioritizing de-escalation and the preservation of evidence while respecting the individual's rights. This means gathering information through observation and communication, seeking to understand the individual's behavior and intent without resorting to immediate, potentially unwarranted, forceful intervention. The legal justification for this approach stems from the Fourth Amendment's protection against unreasonable searches and seizures, which requires probable cause or reasonable suspicion for police action. Furthermore, ethical considerations mandate treating individuals with dignity and respect, and avoiding actions that could be perceived as discriminatory or overly aggressive without sufficient justification. An incorrect approach would be to immediately assume criminal intent based on the individual's presence and demeanor, leading to an unwarranted stop and search. This violates the Fourth Amendment's requirement for reasonable suspicion, which is a lower standard than probable cause, but still necessitates specific, articulable facts indicating criminal activity. Another incorrect approach would be to engage in aggressive questioning or intimidation tactics without a lawful basis, which can undermine public trust and potentially lead to civil rights violations. Finally, ignoring the individual's stated reasons for their action, even if they seem unusual, and proceeding with an assumption of guilt is ethically unsound and legally problematic, as it bypasses the due process owed to every individual. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with situational awareness, followed by information gathering and assessment. This involves observing behavior, listening to explanations, and considering the totality of the circumstances. If reasonable suspicion exists, officers may then proceed with a lawful stop and inquiry. If probable cause develops, further action may be warranted. Throughout this process, officers must remain objective, avoid prejudgment, and continuously evaluate the evolving situation against legal and ethical standards. Question 20. System analysis indicates that a Cleveland police officer receives simultaneous dispatch notifications for 3 separate incidents: a reported active burglary in progress at a residence, a loud noise complaint at a bar, and a vehicle accident with no reported injuries. Based on the Cleveland Division of Police's commitment to public safety and efficient resource allocation, which of the following decision-making processes would best ensure the officer's actions are aligned with departmental priorities and ethical obligations? Option A. Immediately proceed to the reported active burglary, as this incident poses the most immediate threat to life and property, while maintaining communication with dispatch for updates on the other calls. Option B. Go to the vehicle accident next, as it was the second call received and requires a police presence to document the incident. Option C. Respond to the loud noise complaint first, as it is a direct disturbance to the community and may escalate if not addressed promptly. Option D. Proceed to the call that was received first chronologically, regardless of the nature of the incident, to ensure no call is overlooked. The correct answer is A. Immediately proceed to the reported active burglary, as this incident poses the most immediate threat to life and property, while maintaining communication with dispatch for updates on the other calls. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge for law enforcement officers in Cleveland, Ohio, involving the allocation of limited resources to address multiple, concurrent public safety needs. The decision-making framework is critical because an officer's judgment directly impacts the safety of the community and the effective deployment of police services. Misallocation can lead to delayed response times for more critical incidents, potentially resulting in harm or loss. The officer must balance immediate needs with the potential severity of each situation, adhering to departmental policies and ethical obligations. Correct approach analysis. The best approach involves a systematic assessment of the reported incidents based on established Cleveland Division of Police protocols for prioritizing calls for service. This means evaluating factors such as the nature of the offense, e.g., violent crime vs. property crime, the immediacy of danger to life or property, the number of individuals involved or affected, and the availability of other resources. For instance, a report of an active burglary in progress with a potential for violence would typically take precedence over a noise complaint. This prioritization ensures that the most critical threats to public safety are addressed first, aligning with the division's mandate to protect and serve the citizens of Cleveland. This approach is ethically sound as it prioritizes the greatest good for the greatest number and adheres to the principle of duty of care. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach would be to prioritize the call that was received first chronologically, regardless of the nature of the incident. This fails to account for the varying levels of urgency and potential harm associated with different types of calls. A noise complaint received before a report of a serious assault would be wrongly addressed first, leaving a potentially dangerous situation unattended. This demonstrates a failure to exercise sound judgment and a disregard for the division's operational priorities. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize the call that appears to be the most disruptive to the immediate neighborhood, such as a loud party, without considering the potential for greater harm elsewhere. While community disturbance is important, it should not supersede a report of a violent crime or a situation where lives are demonstrably at risk. This approach prioritizes convenience or immediate neighborhood impact over genuine public safety emergencies. A further incorrect approach would be to delegate the decision-making entirely to dispatch without any independent assessment of the situation by the responding officer. While dispatch provides crucial information, the officer on the ground has a unique perspective and responsibility to assess the situation and make informed decisions based on their training and the immediate context, in conjunction with dispatch's guidance. This abdication of responsibility can lead to suboptimal resource allocation. Professional reasoning. Professionals in law enforcement should employ a tiered decision-making framework. First, gather all available information about each incident from dispatch. Second, consult Cleveland Division of Police Standard Operating Procedures, SOP, regarding call prioritization and response protocols. Third, assess the immediate risk to life and property for each incident. Fourth, consider the availability of other units or specialized response teams. Finally, make a reasoned decision based on this comprehensive assessment, communicating the rationale to dispatch and any other involved officers. This systematic process ensures that decisions are objective, justifiable, and aligned with the division's mission and public trust.